call the Berwick Planning Board meeting of February 1st in session, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So as an introduction of board members is next item on the agenda, and I will get my phone that I will use Dave Andreessen's. Otherwise, that Berwick TV person comes up with very upset. The introduction of board members: Sean Winston, Dave Dow, Niall Shore, I'm Paul Bovair, and this is Mike LaRue. And tonight, if Dave is apparently our chairman, will not make it tonight, so I will act as chairman. And we have two members that are missing. Nicole is also missing, so we will have both Mike and Sean as regular members. So we do have a full board functioning. So with that done, next item is a public comment period where people can, if it's not something that we actually have on the agenda and you have something you'd like to add to the meeting, you're welcome to come up and tell us what that something is. And if no one has any public comments, the next item will be the approval of minutes. We have two sets of minutes. We'll deal with them individually. First one is we'll actually take the January 11th minutes first, and these were minutes from 2 meetings ago, and they were tabled. James was going out of town the next morning, and that was one of the issues, is that I think we had some issues with the minutes, and we wanted to table them. They have been rewritten, and I will entertain people to comment on the minutes from January 11th.
I was kind of hoping that you would tell us the difference between the democracy and the republic right in the minutes.
That's at the end, Niles.
And
before we get to the
difference.
end, I forgot, being old and senile. But I'll be glad to actually add to it a little bit. One is a representative, although the people still rule. The republic is a representative form of government, where democracy is one man, one vote, and you count them all up one by one.
And so there. One is the sovereignty is in the people, then elected, and then the third one, as I actually looked this up, is that the head of the executive branch must be appointed or elected, cannot be an inherited position. So no king.
No kings.
Yeah.
All right. Although I do believe the
all
best
of you
form of government.
Who forgot your Civics 101, you just got the update.
But there's nothing about beneficial dictators then?
No.
No. All right. So
They just come and go as they please.
All right. And to add that, I would like to say that next week's, actually, I think it's next week, or in 2 weeks, Berwick Historical Society is going to have a presentation on the Constitution.
No, they're going to have it in March.
In March.
March 21st, to celebrate the 200th anniversary, no, what are we up to? 198th anniversary of Maine's
But
entry
400
into the
years
United
of
States.
pilgrims.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's 2 things going on.
March the 21st.
Yeah.
Will that be that?
With that being said, the guest speaker, I think, will be you
I think so too.
for that. Yeah. You're still on then.
I'm still
Needs to
on.
know.
Needs to know.
All right. Now we have all that fun stuff out of the way.
And with that, I will move that we adopt the minutes as written from January 11th.
And I will, I have a couple things I would
okay.
like to add to those minutes
Okay.
before we move forward on that. There are 3 things that I feel should be added. And I think there was on the comprehensive plan set of paragraphs where it makes a reference to a Harlingen lane of some type. I think it's Haflinger that should be there.
I wasn't at that meeting, Paul, so
Yes.
I can't say, but
I
it
think you're
sounds
right.
likely.
Because-
I think you're
Yes,
right with
I-
that.
Yeah,
I think
I'm
you're right.
almost sure, because I don't
Yeah.
know of any Harlingen in Berwick. So that should be rectified.
Yes,
Right.
Yeah.
right, that's what it should have said.
The second thing that I've starred here is it's recreational marijuana. That we had a topic that evening, and it says Niles Shore said the state may not have anything by May. Paul Bovair said that the 5 categories should be considered separately, and I'd like to add to that, should be considered separately for land use issues. Because it's not clear when you say we're just going to consider something separately. Really should say why. I'd like to add those 4 words if I could. And the last one, I guess I've already covered it. It was the information item about the democracy and a republic difference, and that there was going to be an event in Berwick. It is a Berwick Historical Society presentation, that event, and it just says event. And Niles Shore, one of our planning board members, will be doing the presentation there. And I just kind of felt that should have been added if we're going to be in there adding stuff.
There
So
we
we
go.
have, so
So
would you amend the motion
Yes,
to?
so I will, you just move to amend the motion.
I will move to amend the motion with those 3 small changes. Is there a second?
I'll second.
So we have a motion and a second to amend the January 11th minutes. All those in favor of approving? Next set of minutes, January 18th. So when James got back from vacation, he did a really great job on this one. I have no changes. Anyone else?
Yeah, looks good.
Yeah, I have to abstain from.
Hmm?
I have to abstain from voting on these. I think I wasn't here for that one.
Yeah, according to
Yeah.
this, you weren't.
Yep.
That the-
you're right.
I guess they
I was
were,
at
I guess
the-
this is accurate then.
You're-
It is
yeah.
correct. I was
Yeah.
at the middle school.
So having confirmed the accuracy of these, I will then move that we adopt them as written.
I'll second that.
All right, so Mike second Niles' motion, and we have a motion to approve the 18th of January minutes. All those in favor? You can vote too, Sean.
I had to abstain because I wasn't here.
You weren't here? All right. Next on the agenda is a public hearing, and this is for an amendment to modify the village overlay district boundaries on School Street, and this was requested by Andrea and Rick Burns, and I think they're here. Boy, am I glad you're here.
Excuse me for my tardiness.
I did all the tough part.
Late work.
Yeah. We are up to the public hearing, Dave. With that, I will turn this little bad boy over to you.
Thank you.
I'm positive.
He was waiting as long as he could not
I was
to.
drowning here.
You can have this microphone.
What are you gonna use? Miles is on that one. I'm not gonna say anything anyway.
That's all right. I don't have one either. So.
All right, welcome. So we're at the public hearing right now,
We are at the public hearing.
okay? Proposed amendment to the Village Overlay District, map U3-155 School Street, applicants Andrea and Rick Burns. Public hearing is open to any property owner or any resident of Berwick to come forward and talk about this application only. The applicant is also welcome to come forward, but this is going to be next on the agenda after that. If you have anything you'd like to say, please come forward to the podium. Public hearing is open. Going once, going twice. Seeing nobody come forward, close the public hearing. Moving on the agenda, old business, proposed amendment to the Village Overlay District, map U3-155 School Street, applicant Andrea and Rick Burns.
Okay, so the board needs to consider an amendment to the Village Overlay District that was requested by Andrea and Rick Burns. It's currently in the Commercial Industrial zoning district. And the applicant is requesting this change to be included as part of the village overlay because she would like to be able to use the zoning requirements to assist her in her development of her property, basically. So there's no issue with extending this boundary because her property is immediately adjacent to the current Village Overlay District boundary.
Okay, applicants. Would you like to come to the podium, just talk about your application, or talk about the proposed amendment, talk a little bit about your project?
I think she kind of covered most of it.
Yeah, if you don't want to do that, I think we should at least tell everyone, where it is and why we think it may be a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, all right.
And just state your name and address for the record.
My name is Andrea Burns, and I live at 55 School Street in Berwick. And from what was said, we would like to do some further development on our property. Our biggest issue is we currently have an apartment on the second floor of the attached carriage house. We would like to put in a second apartment on the first floor. We have previously had a conditional use there as an antique shop, and we'd now like to take that space and turn it into apartment. But under the current zoning, we are 6,000 square feet short of being able to add an additional unit. We are abutted on two sides by the Village Overlay District. We are right next to the, I don't know if it's still called the Bateman, the old high school apartments. Police station is directly behind us, and it is also my understanding that the property attached to the police station is also being looked at for apartment development. So we're basically surrounded by apartment development. So we'd like to take advantage of the village overlay. We do have plenty of off-street parking because we had to have it for the shop. So there's no, and there is an apartment on the upstairs.
Excuse me. And this is the lot right next to the Bateman project.
Yes, yep. So like I said, we're surrounded on two sides by the village overlay currently.
Questions from the board?
Probably more comments than question, I think, because we've actually had a second citizen that would like to be included right in that same vicinity.
On Wilson
Yeah,
Street.
And I realize this public hearing was called for the Burnses, but the way we actually had a small discussion at the last meeting about where the lines should be modified to include, to be included in the village overlay. And
You're talking about the project on, or the proposal on Wilson Street?
yeah, I am. And talking about where we should be changing the lines, if we're gonna have a town vote on this, and we need to, we should make people aware of what we've been thinking. And if I remember right, my memory serves me right, Wilson Street, we initially, between the Methodist Church and the quilt shop and the entrance to Estabrook, we originally considered that to be a good potential place for the village overlay to extend into those, I think, 4 lots.
Correct. Yep.
And for some reason, we didn't do it, and now it's come back to us, as a request. So, in thinking about that, and I'm kind of confused for this evening if we're talking only about the Burns property next to Berwick High School and the police station, or if we're including the change that we actually want to do on the map.
This map that was provided, oh, go ahead, Kathy.
I was just going to clarify, yes, we will be talking about the, we're going to further the conversation, Paul, that we were having at the last meeting. Because Andrea had requested this public hearing so that she could advance her property, we're honoring that request, because there was a delay. I think there was the snowstorm meeting or whatever, so we're advancing Andrea because, she had requested it. So it's okay for you to discuss it and then decide whether or not to recommend it to, the select board now. And then later in the meeting, we'll be discussing the further expansion of the Village Overlay District, which of course would include Andrea because she's asking for inclusion, but they're two separate matters.
Two
Will we
separate.
be able to roll the two together so that we don't?
Well, yeah, I mean, basically, this is the proposed draft, right? So, yes, Andrea's would be rolled together, in terms of the recommendation. The select board would receive a recommendation for her property, and then a recommendation for the expansion of the zone. I think they'll understand. I'll make sure that the narrative includes the fact that Andrea had asked well in advance before the board started to talk about the actual, increased expansion, just to make it clear to them.
May I ask a question? Is the increased expansion looking at the residential houses along Wilson Street and School Street that actually abut that whole large piece of property?
Correct.
Making School Street basically the line?
School Street to Logan Street, including the shop, the auto,
Hall's Auto
Hall's Auto.
and
Aroma
Aroma
Joe's.
Joe's.
Aroma
Yeah,
Joe's,
I mean,
yeah.
which makes sense.
Yep.
and including the opposite side of the street as well.
Oh, so that's
Bless
why
you.
they're
Oh, actually, this map doesn't include the opposite side of the street. I thought we would talk about that. I didn't want to do that until we had a full discussion about that.
Okay, so just to be clear, we're voting, in this whole business, we're voting on just the application for the Burnses.
Yes.
Now, because it's a proposed change, because it would be a change to the Village Overlay District, it has to go to the selectmen, it has to go to town meeting.
Correct.
So even if we vote tonight on the application, we're voting on the application tonight.
You're voting to recommend it to the select board.
They can't do anything until after the town meeting,
Correct.
unfortunately. Okay, understood. So that's what happens with those opt-ins then. Yeah.
But if I understand that correctly, then we are only voting on the Burns application this evening, because that's
Correct.
all that was advertised.
Right now.
Later this evening.
But
Yes.
Right
won't
now,
that
we're
be
just
a
voting-
separate, once we start discussing where the line should be, there'll be some interest there,
Yes. You'll need to have
especially
another
heading
public
up School
hearing.
Street, further up. I don't believe Wilson Street will be an issue, being across from Prime, but, so that's when we cover that topic.
Right, yep, because you would, if you decide to, advance this, it too will need to be, noticed in the proper manner, and all the abutters will need to get notices for the public hearing, so,
And then we will only have one change to vote on with a warrant article then.
yeah, in the end, it will be folded into one change
Yeah.
on the warrant
So
article.
this is unique. So they have a pending application. We're approving that tonight, but they can't act on it.
A pending application for a zoning change?
So, okay, that's right. It's a zoning change,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Yes. Yep, yep.
It's
that's
not a
the difference.
conditional use.
No, not
Right.
yet, because she
Right.
needs to have her property, and I'm sure we'll see Andrea back.
Once it's actually rezoned,
It should be all set.
is it still a conditional use? You still have to come back and apply, or do you just apply for a building permit?
Yeah, I'm sorry, you're right, it would be, I'm sorry, you're right, because you're only adding one apartment, yes. Yes, she would actually be visiting the code enforcement officer in
Right.
that case, I misspoke, thank you,
Okay.
Andrea,
Yeah, you wouldn't have to come back here.
no.
Not that we wouldn't love to come back.
The short walk.
Yeah. Did anyone have any questions
Yeah,
for
does the
me?
board have anything?
I don't have any questions, no.
All right.
No?
All right, so how would the board, any further discussion on this? So we would be, so just to get this right, the motion would be for recommend to the selectmen a proposed amendment to the Village Overlay District for map U3-155 School Street.
Perfect.
Okay. Any further questions before we call the vote? Okay,
Need
a
a
motion?
second on that motion?
I wasn't making a motion.
Oh,
I was,
I'll make the motion for what he said.
and I'll second Niall's motion for what Dave said.
okay, so the motion is to recommend to the selectmen a proposed amendment, or approval of the proposed amendment to the Village Overlay District map U3-155 School Street. Further discussion? All in favor? Before I clarify, before I vote, are both of you?
Yeah.
We
they're-
were,
They're,
yeah.
they're real members.
Okay, you know
tonight.
what? That's fine. You guys can vote tonight. I won't vote tonight, so.
So we have an overfull board tonight
now
then,
we have
right
too,
now.
now we have too many.
But it,
One too many, yeah.
yeah, so we could, but, so there's a formality,
Turns voting.
but I don't think it's very important. So
It's
we
not
have
very
6
important.
voting
I don't
It's
think
not
it's
members.
very
very
important,
important.
so-
Let's,
We'll say
let's
6-0.
vote 6 members.
Yeah.
They can
Okay.
vote if they want.
All in favor,
Both of them.
signify by raising your hands. Okay, that passes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 0. Okay,
6-0.
6, 0, 1, no, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Dave
I
didn't
did not
We
vote.
need to vote.
Oh, I thought I saw your hand go up.
Well, no, because,
Okay.
David abstained.
no, David voted.
David voted, okay.
David.
Okay, that David, okay.
I apologize. This is what happens when you have to work late, so. We're just down 1, so that means, but if both of
6-0.
them are in, if both of them are voting, I cannot vote.
Okay.
Because Nicole's not here, and that's why I
Okay.
did not vote. So it's
Okay,
5-0.
gotcha.
It's 5-0. There you go. Okay, I apologize. Old business, continuing down the line here. Conditional use application, medical marijuana production facility. Applicant Paper Birch Property LLC, map R70-12-1, 357 Portland Street. Kathy?
So I think what you have in your packet are revised plans that Jeff has provided. He's also provided a number of other items. I'm hoping that, that James gathered them all as I shot them at him.
Oh, okay.
But there should be, first of all, there should be a narrative whereby Jeff is responding to my staff memo, and that should have been in there. There was a memo from the fire chief, as I recall.
That came through yesterday,
Yep,
and I'm not sure if the board has that in their hands, if that was not part of the package that, when I dropped off last week to James.
We have your letter.
You have my letter that was to the chief. I met with the chief. The changes, there were 2 changes that he wanted on the plan. One was to increase the radius on the turn of the driveway. The second was to add access to the rear of the buildings in case he needed to get back there. And then the third one was add a note to the plan that indicates that there'd be a Knox box on the building. We received a letter back from the chief indicating that he had reviewed those revised plans that you have inside of your package, and that he had no further issues with that. That letter has been provided to, it was sent by the chief to me and to James, and then I forwarded a copy off to Kathy.
Do you have
What
that?
was the third item? Could you repeat?
A Knox box. A Knox
I
box.
don't.
Yeah.
I didn't print it. I made sure
Yeah,
that
I don't-
James was aware of it, but I didn't print it for tonight. Sorry, I was on the road a lot today,
Yeah.
so I didn't have a lot of access to a printer.
Yeah, no, I apologize. I didn't think to bring it, just because I knew that package, that letter went to James too. So going back to my memo that is in your package, and it addresses the questions and the concerns that were raised by Kathy in her review memo, and indicates the areas that we've made changes to the plan and provided additional information that she has requested. Again, I mentioned there was a request that we receive further comment from the police chief regarding the tenant's access to the building. I have a response back from that came back, actually today from the chief.
I did see it.
Yep, I forwarded a copy to James and to Kathy with that. You don't have it, he had no problems with the additional, availability for the tenants to be able to get there. We still have business hours if patients do come to it, to the property to pick up medicine, as the same time as before on the application, on the, the Monday, the regular business hours that are listed on the application. There was a question if there was gonna be a loading dock or what kind of doors were on the building. We've addressed that. There will be no loading dock. The only doors that will be in there will be a larger, like a 4-foot wide passage door instead of a conventional 3-foot door. We're gonna do a 4-foot door for the tenants to be able to get access to it. There's no windows in the building, and there's only those doors to be able to get into that for that aspect, for keeping the building obscure and keeping it safe and secure. That's how we're gonna work that building on that side. There was a question about landscaping, and I have a waiver request that I'd like to present to the board. In particular, it's for land use section 7.75 that talks about having screening for parking in non-residential uses. I would like to pass that out to the board if I can now, or we could talk about that waiver request and go over the plan.
It's actually screening from a public road, Jeff, that,
Yeah. And I'll show you, Kathy, what I
Okay.
did here.
Sure.
Was, in the document I just handed out, I put in a direct copy of what that section of screening talks about, off-street parking and loading. And the section indicates that off-street parking and loading spaces for non-residential uses where not enclosed within a building shall be effectively screened from view by continuous landscaping area not less than 6 feet in height unless waived by the planning board for expressed reasons. Our intention here is to use the existing tree growth out in that area where the building's put in and only cut what we need to get the work done. And the fact that our parking stalls that we have for our use are parallel to the road, so they're not gonna have headlights that are gonna be flashing into the roadway. Our stalls, the actual start of the first handicap stall on our plan, from the edge of that handicap stall to the edge of Route 4 is over 140 feet. There's quite a distance between where the parking is and where the edge of the roadway is. And we feel that justifies the request for not having additional landscaping for the small amount of parking that we have for this use.
Can you address the last sentence of 7.5?
Yep, no off-street parking and
No, 7.5, not 7.5.
okay, so, I don't have 7.5 in front of me, if
Let
you
me
could
read
read.
it to you.
Yes, sir.
All parking lots shall be landscaped along the property boundaries with shrubbery, trees, and other landscape materials.
Yep. We have, well, all parking areas, we have, once the building's all phased out and constructed, our parking will be inside that horseshoe that we talked about that you see on there. And then we have the existing tree growth that is along Route 4, along that edge down on here for the shield the parking. Along here is Route 4. We have a large distance between the edge of pavement and the right-of-way.
Which is all trees, right? I mean, the whole lot is trees right now.
There's a lot, this section between the roadway and Route 4 is pretty much grass
Yeah.
and tall grass. It doesn't really become trees until we get up here, and you can see that by this line, this kind of bubbled line on the plan. And again, our parking is back in here, parallel to the roadway out on this side. When we get to, the final phase aspect of it, the parking would still be in here, and it's surrounded by the building on 3 sides, with the only exposed area here. And we're counting on using the existing trees where we can, as our landscape buffer between parking and the street.
So are you saying that you're in compliance or that you need a waiver?
I think we need a waiver because the section talks, that 7.5 talks about screening, but in particular, 7.75 says that there has to be a 6-foot high, continuous landscape area not less than 6 feet in height.
So that it's
And
the 6 feet
continuous, and I guess the
height
question is the continuous. You know, we have tree growth, but what is considered continuous? And our thought was, if we can seek a waiver to use the existing trees, then we felt that that was meeting the intent of that.
So that could be the, if we decide to go the waiver route, that could be the condition of the waiver, that those existing trees have to remain there.
How heavy is that tree growth, though? I haven't been by there in a while.
It's not
Scrub
super
pines.
heavy.
Scrub pines, right?
It's pines, yep.
And they're not parallel to Route 4, they're perpendicular to Route 4. Is that right? The trees kind of, there's an opening when you.
Yeah,
sit
there's
on
there's
Park
an
Road
opening, and that's
yeah,
about, yeah,
You can see all the way back to the rear of the lot.
That's
There's
right.
a few trees.
yeah.
But the pine tree line will be on the west side of the building.
Yeah, if
Um,
you can follow my hands, you're right, Paul, is that right in through here where they cut in the access, they've kind of treed out this side.
Yeah, right.
But where we have, and that kind of, that cut in follows almost where our driveway is. Where we come through here is that there's still tree growth that kind of makes an L around this area. So we're gonna cut trees where this building goes, but a good section of this in here will remain except for where we have our septic.
Do you think that'll be sufficient to screen from Route 4?
I think it will be better than any of the other commercial properties on Route 4. But I guess the question is that what is the definition of continuous? And there will be trees that will be there. Is that considered continuous, or are you looking for a dense arborvitae type of buffer? And I guess my thought process for the waiver request was that reuse the existing trees that are there and keep that natural buffer, as opposed to having an arborvitae or something, if that's the wish of the board, to enclose that off. It just didn't seem like it would fit right.
Is that something that we would look at on a site visit
I mean, if we were gonna go, yeah, I mean, you've
for a
gone.
waiver?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know that we were talking about not doing a whole site visit and just going on the weekends just because of the daylight and because of the weather that we've been having with the snow. But if this is something that we want to do on a site visit, I think it would be worthwhile.
I think,
So you can
Yeah, I'd definitely like to
explain
look at
exactly.
Yeah,
trees
I
that are
mean,
there.
What's that?
I definitely
Well,
like
then
to
we
see
could
what's
get a
there,
better eye of it
get an
and
idea of it. Just how thick it is and everything.
right.
Okay.
yeah, the plan doesn't show either way what's gonna be left for screening. It's hard to tell by looking at the plan, but I think if we just go on site and look,
Yeah,
it'll become obvious.
it's not very thick. I mean, I'm sure most of you have driven past it and seen that area. It's not a thick, dense evergreen buffer. But
It looks like also you're gonna have to be cutting for your proposed leach field.
yeah, but
Which will
that
open that
is,
right
I mean, I guess if we look at, that's along the building, and that really wouldn't be adjacent to where the parking is. I guess that's the question is, where in the ordinance do you stop for that section of off-street parking shielding? You know what I'm saying? I mean, if we look at where that is, how does that, where do you end with a landscaping buffer on that side? Because we have our building here, we have parking, but our leach field is back, in line with the building itself.
And you're gonna have to take out some trees as well.
Some trees, yeah.
Okay, we'll just have to look at that. Now we know we're doing a site visit. For sure. I know you said you sent the letter from the police chief.
Yep.
But the letter from the fire chief,
Yep.
where's that?
That is in, it's in my computer at the office, it's in Kathy's email, and it's in James's email.
You got that too?
I did,
Okay,
and I read it.
all right.
That came through today.
Right, yeah, and Jeff, did you point out the gravel?
Yeah,
Travel
we
ways?
talked about,
Okay.
that was one of the aspects of,
Yeah.
you can see this light shading area on the final build out, where the fire chief wanted to be able to have a gravel access way to the back of the fire, on the sides of the building if he had to fight a fire.
Okay. We'll just make sure that James gives us to us for the next meeting.
Absolutely.
Puts it in the packet. James, if, when you're listening and doing the minutes.
Well, but I think we need to clarify something. We just approved minutes from the January 18th meeting, and on page 3 of those minutes, it says, "There will be a 2-week deadline before each planning board meeting to submit materials."
Yes,
What does that mean? Because obviously this morning is not 2 weeks ago.
yes, because this applicant had started its,
Oh, I
their
understand it
process
doesn't
before
apply
the
to him
deadline,
today. I'm
yeah.
just, in the future, does that mean we will now demand that people get us stuff in,
Yes,
and show us some degree of courtesy and get it to us 2 weeks ahead of time so we can actually read it before we come here?
yes,
That would be a lovely change.
yes.
But it does not affect,
Yeah,
does not affect